here on Southern Sports Gumbo for one last final episode before the national championship game. If we decide to hop on in the middle, we might. But I mean, hey, we're down to the last college football game of the year. It's going to be a great game between two really talented teams. Probably no doubt that these are two of the top five teams in the country. They've played that way all year. Um, and, we talked about it last night, so we're going to talk about it a little bit more tonight. Weather appears good. Looks like the crowd's going to be 50-50 per se. Some think Indiana's going to bring a few more. Some talk about Miami showing up well, too. Tickets are, I think, I read on average $4,000 a ticket. Prices had trended down over the last couple of years, but they're back up for this one. And I think some of that has to do with, number one, it's Indiana's first time. And number two, Miami's wanting to be back in prominence. And while they don't have a lot of fans as far as in their hometown, what they do have are very passionate in the fans that they do. So you got that aspect. And then one more thing before we get into it that I think is an interesting aspect. 50 years ago, the Indiana basketball team finished undefeated and the last college basketball team to go undefeated. And so in the 50th anniversary of the basketball team, the Indiana football team has a chance to win the national championship tonight. So just some interesting things there. Sweet, what you got tonight as far as just some last minute expectations, thoughts about the game? What's important?
I woke up this morning thinking that I would change my mind and, I'd wake up and say, there's Miami's not going to win this damn game. Indiana's just playing too good. Still have the same feeling. Still feel like Miami's gonna find a way to pull this out. I want Indiana to win. I love the story. I love Cignetti, what he's been able to do, and how he individually has changed college football, in my opinion, with how quickly he turned this around. Indiana historically has been the worst. This isn't hyperbole. They have been the worst Power 4 school in the history of college football. They're the worst. Nobody is worse than Indiana. That was true until 2 seasons ago. After last season, as good as they went to the playoff game, they were still the worst. So at some point this season, they eclipsed Northwestern in wins or a win-loss, or their percentage or whatever. So they are now the second worst P4 team in the history of college football. So that would be a really neat story. And they're a likable group of people. Like I said, everybody loves Cignetti. Mendoza's a good kid. You don't have a bunch of idiots running around causing trouble. You don't hear about arrests and all that stuff up in Bloomington. So I like the story. I just, other than people complaining about the senior citizens on Indiana's offensive and defensive lines, it's been a great story, and it'll be really neat if they're able to finish it off. I think the biggest, one of the biggest keys to tonight's game is going to be injuries, and who's playing, who's not, who's affected by injuries that will play. Miami's going to be without tight end Elijah Lofton, linebacker Malik Bryant, Dalen Upshaw is a wide receiver. They'll also be without Lucas, who you talked about last night. He's going to miss the first half because of the suspension from last game. I don't like that rule either, but that's neither here nor there. Indiana's going to be without starting defensive lineman Stephen Daly and Kellen Wyatt, as well as DB Damari Brown is going to be questionable for Miami. So there are a few injuries that they were trying to keep under the rug, and for perhaps trying to throw off another team strategy or whatever. I'm looking forward to a great game. Weather won't be a factor. You said should be about 50-50, $4,000 a seat. That's insane.
It's crazy.
T and I and the kids went down to Hard Rock a few years ago when Georgia was playing Florida State. That was the year that Florida State, should have been in the playoff, and the QB got hurt, and so they ended up playing Georgia in the Orange Bowl and getting beat by like 70 or something like that. So there's really not a bad seat in that stadium, but for $4,000, mother of God, that is insane. For Indiana fans, they've been waiting for this moment their whole lives. So they've had that incendiary income that they can throw at this. Miami, Yeah, too. Miami's got a well-heeled fan base. The game is at home. Basically, this is where they play their games at. So you would think they would have strong representation. We'll see how that turns out for the game. Like I said, looking forward to see how they play it. Like you talked about last night, little strategy things like, will if Miami wins the toss, are they gonna defer, or are they gonna go ahead and take the ball so they can try to keep Lucas missing a half, trying to minimize that blow there. Just lots of things. What are your thoughts on the game, Kev?
Well, so the interesting point today, Damari Brown and Federico, two cornerbacks that have played a lot but did not played in recent weeks. They've said both those guys are going to play tonight. So does that minimize that need to to try to get time of possession in the first half? I don't know. It's still a good question. The weather's a good question. I thought it was also an interesting point today, listening to some stuff. Signetti addressed the rat poison because I took Indiana because it's a safe pick. I'll just call it what it is. But I'm rooting for Miami tonight. I got some orange colors here. I'm going to root for Miami in this game. And I think the rat poison is something that is absolutely real in the fact that they've won easily against Alabama, won easily against Oregon last week or 9 days ago, 10 days ago. So where are they at mentally? So I think that's going to be a real big challenge. And then Miami, who has been, they were questioned this whole thing, and they have came in and played well every week. Their players played well against Ole Miss. Coaches probably cost them a couple of points there, and they dropped a couple of interceptions. So that game, again, was a 17-point game. So I just think that this is going to be a really good game tonight. And I think there's going to be some intangibles, and it's going to be interesting to how it plays out. I don't think this will be a game like we've seen Indiana in the last two games come in and just dominate the other team simply because, excuse me,
Bless you.
I just don't see that there's the line of scrimmage. We've talked about it a lot. I still think that's the most important factor. I don't see them dominating Miami on the line of scrimmage either way. So I think the intangibles, how that's going to play out are important in this game tonight. I still like Indiana 27-23, but I certainly like your pick, and I certainly like the aspect that Miami's going to have chances to win this game. And I saw again today, we talked a little bit about how Beck had some interceptions, but if you take the two games where he had them out, not that many. And I read today, I think in his last 100 and so many throws, he's only had two interceptions. So, again, it shows how he's playing well. And, again, 55% third down conversion for the Hurricanes in the playoffs. I think all those factors are going to play into this game tonight, and I think it could be a game that's played well. I mentioned Indiana's receivers last night. I think their receivers have to have a good game tonight. If they don't, if Miami's secondary is able to contain them, and Mendoza doesn't have an incredible 75% passing completion percentage tonight, I think the game could get really tight in the fourth quarter. So, that's kind of my thoughts. The things to look for: how well Indiana's able to pass the ball, Miami's line of scrimmage, can they run the ball, how the secondary plays out early, and those type of things. What else? Anything else you're thinking of?
No, I'm with you. I was just taking a peek back at Beck's stats over the season. He had since that two interception game in the overtime loss against SMU. He's thrown two picks the rest of the way. So so since mid October, he's had two interceptions. So he's really tightened up. And is trending in the right direction. Hasn't been crazy in the playoffs. The first two games, he had 103 yards against Texas A&M in that first playoff game, 19 for 26. So that dink dunk, one touchdown pass. In the next game, he had 138 yards for one touchdown pass, no picks. In the last game, he had a one pick and two touchdown passes. They threw the ball a lot more. He had 268 yards in that game. So, but that Ole Miss, we knew he was going to have to be more aggressive against Ole Miss because they were going to score, and Miami was going to have to match him. So he's been able to stay in the high 60s for an average in the playoffs, or completion percentage, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. If he can continue on that pace and have a mistake free game, go for 65, 70% completion with no picks. I like Miami's chances. Now if they can rattle him and get to him, it's like I said, if they start like Oregon did against them, I think it's Katie bar the door and it'll get ugly quick. But like I said, my ideal game would be for Miami to come out and punch Indiana in the mouth, just to see how they react, because we haven't seen a lot of that this year. So I'd really like to see how Indiana reacts, and I think they'd react well to it. So what do you think?
So penalties are another thing. We know Indiana doesn't have many. Let's go back a little bit in Miami's season. So starting at the end of the season, Pitt, they needed a big win over Pitt. They needed to be decisive because Notre Dame had a decisive win over Pitt. 5 penalties, 28 yards. Very decisive. Beat them 38-7. Then they roll into the Texas A&M game. 4 penalties, 15 yards, and we know they won a hard fought game. Had to go down to the wire and hit a running play there at the end. But again, defense, no turnovers, 4 penalties, 15 yards. Ohio State, 0 penalties in that game. Again, they crept back into it against Ole Miss, but I just bring those games out because Miami can play. We talk about Indiana's execution, and it's really good. Miami can have that same type of execution, and they have a lot of games this year. 3 of their last 4 games, 5 or less penalties. And you take Ole Miss out; they did have 10 in that game, but you take that game out, then you're basically 3 games with an average of 3 penalties a game. So, and one game they had none. So I think, again, I think all this stuff lines up to a very physical game that we're going to see some back and forth. Field position is going to matter. Indiana's kicker, you talked about special teams last night. I do think Miami could do something there in the run game or in the return game with Tony. But Indiana's kicker, he's only missed one, and he hit a 58-yarder right before the half in the Peach Bowl. So I think you got some things there to look forward to. Again, with the good weather tonight. So again, I just think I think we have a really good game in front of us. People are, still talking about Indiana so much. Everyone feels like Indiana's going to win. I did see Booger McFarland pick Miami to win tonight. Of course, he played in Tampa a lot of years, so maybe the Florida thing there for him, and he knows a lot of those guys. But most of the media is going with Indiana. I do think it's going to be a close game, and I do think Miami has a better chance to win this game than most people think.
Yeah, 8.5's a lot of points. And Vegas, Vegas isn't wrong often. That's why they're the oasis in the desert. So it'll be really interesting to see from that standpoint too. If Indiana does win, are they able to cover? Are they able to make it look as easy as they did the first 2 games? I mean, are they going to be that dominant? I can't see Miami rolling over like that. I think Miami's a little more disciplined than that. They're hitting their stride on both sides of the ball. See, they've given up a total of 44 points in the postseason. I mean, if they can, so that's 344. I guess that's what, about 15 points a game they've given up postseason. If they hold Indiana to around 15 points, I like their chances.
Yeah,
it's going to be tough.
Miami was more dominant against Ohio State than Indiana was against Ohio State, even though both teams beat Ohio State.
That's true. That's true.
In Alabama, Indiana beat Alabama, but let's be honest, Alabama's one-dimensional. And you get behind, like they did early, 17-0 at the half. Indiana scores first and second half. And at that point, Indiana knew they were going to throw. Indiana has guys that can rush the passer, and that's what they did. And the game was over, and Alabama just kind of had enough. And then the turnovers in that Oregon game. So while Indiana's looked good, their execution has been good. The two teams that they've played and won decisively did not play very
No.
well. So again, you there's not Miami has not played a bad game in the playoffs. They've won 3 games against 3 very good teams. Essentially 3 one-loss teams. You could argue that those teams should be, top 5, 6, and they were 7 top 7 teams that Miami's beat. They beat number 2, they beat number 5, and they beat number 7. So, from that standpoint, they've not played a bad game. So I just think all that plays into it. And again, Cignetti mentioned the rat poison, but where are his players at? Do they feel like that they're going to win this game? Can he keep them focused to play one play at a time? Or is this a game where the players are to the point of, we just got to come out here and we just got to play and we're going to win? Miami punches them in the face early. I really do think that is likely to happen. Miami punches them in the face with a running game, whether they score or not, but just say, hey, we're going to run the ball on you guys. We're going to move the ball. It's maybe low scoring early. And we, it ends up being a dogfight. And it's hard to turn it on. If a team comes out and they're not sharp from the beginning, it is hard to turn that on and switch that key and become good. And it's such a fine line in being so sharp and being good. You can still be good. And that's the thing I think Indiana has to worry about tonight. Are they going to give their sharpest performance, or are they going to give a good performance? And I lean towards the good.
Yeah, that nervous energy is always, you never know how it's going to affect you. It hasn't seemed to have bothered them so far during the playoffs, but this isn't the playoff now. This for all the marbles. This is just a one shot deal here. They listen to it. They're human. There's no way they haven't been told by everybody how great they are and how dominant they are, one of the greatest ever, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, you still got to go out and do it one more time, and you're doing it against a solid team. It's not like they're playing, they're not playing Purdue tonight. They're playing Miami, who's probably got more talented kids than Indiana
Yes.
does top to bottom. So it's not like Miami winning should be this big upset that they're making it out to be. Like I said, but again, credit that to Cignetti and his staff with what they've been able to do and the cohesion they've been able to create in 2 seasons, and basically one with Mendoza being new this season and everything else. So it's been something. Like I said, I'm as big a fan of as anybody of the job that Cignetti's done. And that's why when people talk about, it'll take a few years to get things done. Why will it take a few years? If you're willing to spend the money and you've got the coaching staff that can evaluate and develop, it shouldn't take any time. If Indiana's proving that, didn't show people, then I don't know what to tell you. They were the worst team in the history of college football, who played in the playoff last year and now is playing for the national championship tonight. So it's nice to know as a college football fan, if your team was trash this year, if we can get the right coach and the right players, we can be there at the end next year.
One last thing that I like, just from you mentioned the coaches and that, a lot of times you get into these national championship games, and sometimes a coach will want to overcoach a little bit. I think when you get in these games, look, both these teams have played 15 games. They've practiced for, 4 months now, 5 months that the seasons went along. The execution has been there. The practice part's been there. And I think the team and the coach, and I really honestly, I think Cignetti's the best coach in this matchup, but I honestly favor Cristobal in what I'm about to say. I think the coach that comes out and their team plays the most free. In other words, it's guys, we've done what we need to get here. You help get them relaxed. The moment's going to tighten them up. The coach that's able to best get the team to the level of let's just relax and just go play. We know what we are. Be confident. We've won 13 games. We won 15 games. We can beat anybody we play. The coach is able to get their team to that moment at the beginning of the game, I think is key to this. Some coaches want to try to coach every little detail, and that's important during the season. But when you get to this championship game, you do not need your team to come out tight. And I think that could be one other last thing that I'm going to mention and I honestly favor Cristobal and Miami on that aspect.
I get that too, and Cristobal has been there as a player as well. Signetti's been there as a coach, not as a head coach, but as an
Right.
assistant coach, and he got to his tutelage was under the best. He watched Saban do it, and he patterns himself a lot after Saban, and the results are undeniable. So if he's able to keep the kids focused on winning that play, winning the moment, um, you know, it's I'm pumped. It's going to be a great game. I'm looking forward to it. I hope that we're able to hop on tomorrow or whenever we get together again and talk about how much fun it was to watch and how close it was and nothing better than a championship game coming down to the wire, unless it's your team that's in it, and then you just want them to blow the other team out. That's a lot more fun, actually. But still, to be here and to know that it's just you and one other team, and this is for everything. It doesn't get any better than this.
Nope. Well, let's hit 5 minutes on the portals. Couple of little happenings,
Sure.
yesterday, today. What do you want to close this out portal wise? And then we'll say one more thing about the game.
Okay. Interesting developments as far as LSU's portal possibilities go. Um, Offensive tackle Jordan Seaton from the University of Colorado was supposed to cut his visit short, as we talked about offline before, but he's going to spend tonight in Baton Rouge before heading to Oregon. That I don't know. I mean, it can't be a bad sign for LSU that he's deciding to hang around more. At the end of the day, with both him and the newest member of Ole Miss's team to enter the portal, Prince Will Umamalian, I think is how you pronounce it.
You did it better
You know,
than I would.
it's and for me, it's this simple. LSU can land both those kids. You just got to get the money right. Anybody else can land both these kids too. You just got to get the money right. So I don't know from a money management standpoint what LSU has in the budget to spend. But if there is one position that you're going to spend for, with the way everything's played out and what you have as a roster right now, left tackle is that position. So if you're going to throw money at somebody, the Seton kid is probably as good as anybody for bang for your buck. And then you can never have too many edge guys. Umamilian, he had what, 9.5 sacks last season or something like that. He's a monster on the edge. A lot of pressures. That they would be two fantastic pickups. They are going to be two fantastic pickups for whoever lands them. I know that Oregon is in the mix for both of them with their Nike money. There are a few other teams that are in the mix for them. So those are the two most interesting ones. Damon Wilson from Mizzou. Haven't heard much on him. Mensa, another late add to the portal. Word on the street is Miami is, it's not if but when. So we'll be interested to see how that goes. It's still some talent out there for teams who want to pony up. What are your thoughts?
Well, you mentioned Seton, and again, when you look at Seton's PFF grades, and PFF is not the gospel, but it's a good, guide in my opinion. He's a passing pass protection. He's in the mid 80s for the season, and that's elite level pass protection. Running game, he's got to improve there. But Eric Wolford, a new LSU line coach, he was at Bama and he really was effective in the running game there. So I don't worry about this guy's obviously talented. I don't worry about any run blocking with him. And again, if you're getting a left tackle, you want him for their pass blocking. And so, having I think it's an 83 for the season, but he had games where he was in the 90s. He only had one game pass pro wise where he wasn't good, and that was against Utah. Was that because he was dinged up? I don't know. But every other game, he was 80 or above pretty much across the board, and a couple of games in the 90s. And that's, PFF, if you're in the 60s, it's considered a good game, like mid to high 60s. If you're in the 70s, it's a really good game. And again, if you're 80, 90, that's elite level block pass protection. So you could not get a better pass protector at left tackle than you could for him. And if LSU does get him, they honestly are at a point they don't have any weaknesses on the team. So, and then you go to Prince. I really like him a lot. He had 9 sacks last year, and I think he's got the chance to be an elite level guy. And you add him to Jordan Ross and Relaford. I mean, I just think that gives you 3 great defensive ends. But also, Relaford, goes about 275. It also gives you the ability to slide him inside if you need to, like on a 3rd and long. And if you had Ross, Relaford, and Prince on the field on 3rd downs, 3rd and long, I just like what it gives you. So I would love for LSU to get him. To your point, it's going to come to money for those 2 guys. And then, the Mensa situation, that one's really interesting in how Miami came in there late. And that's the rumor is, that's where he may end up. And then the dollar amount, within that, paying his buyout and then signing him might take upwards to $10 million. And an interesting thing in his contract is Duke has the rights to the money that he makes off of NIL. It's kind of a different contract when they signed him last year. So I don't know. It's just going to be interesting how that plays out. And then also with Prince, it does look like there would be a buyout involved with about $500,000. But that's not deterring people, like we talked about last night. So I think, we should know for sure if Prince is in the portal tomorrow. Today was the last day that, if he filed by Friday, Ole Miss has a couple of days.
He's in. I'm looking at it right now. He's in.
Okay. Today was the day, Ole Miss could try to, but they had to put him in. So he's in. And so you've got, you're going to start to hear what, his visits tomorrow. I think we'll hear something on Seton. Very telling tomorrow. I think, him not making that Oregon trip, you got to get signed up for classes pretty soon. I mean, could he go to Oregon on a 1-day trip tomorrow? Yes, he could. But I think we're going to hear something on Seton pretty soon. Prince probably, in the next couple of days, we'll know something with him. And then Mensa in Miami, I would think pretty much after tonight, Miami would try to get him on campus and lock him down the next couple of days. So certainly going to lead to some interesting things for next year. And so, again, I'm looking forward to that. We're going to, do some basketball stuff, maybe hop on here mid tonight or tomorrow, to recap this game tonight. And then we'll get into basketball season. But we're certainly doing a preseason top 25 for next year in football. It's not too far away because a lot of these rosters we're going to know in the next 2 weeks and be able to kind of look at that aspect and whether we do top 25 or we do top 10, 15, and then 10 teams that are going to slide from the portal. There's a lot of stuff out there that we can talk about that's going to be obvious.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Anything else you got?
No, just look forward to the game. That's the last thing I got to say about it. The game, again, like you've said too, like, subscribe, make a comment. Let's see, I've got Indiana in a close win. Sweets has Miami in a close win. I think we're going to see a good game, and I'm not going to be surprised if either team wins. So make some comments about it. Tell your friends, listen, and let's see how tonight turns out.
Sure, going to be a lot of fun. Be safe out there and enjoy the game. And if we don't catch you at halftime or after the game, we'll probably catch you tomorrow.